I walked into the investment firm where my son-in-law works, and he suddenly laughed. "Security, please escort this gentleman out." He clearly wandered in from the wrong building. He called his colleagues over to witness my humiliation. But then his managing partner appeared, glanced at my son-in-law, and said coldly, "Mr. Preston, your $15 million portfolio transfer has been approved. And as for you, clear out your desk." My son-in-law's arrogance turned into career suicide, but that was only the beginning. You won't believe what happened next. Before we continue, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to you. My name is William Preston. Most people call me Bill. I'm 66 years old, and for 42 years I owned and operated Preston Timber Processing. Built it from nothing back in 1981. Sold it 18 months ago for $31 million. But my son-in-law Brandon didn't know that, and I made sure he never would. Let me tell you why. The November rain hammered against my Subaru's windshield as I parked on the street outside Brandon and Sarah's house in Riverside. His Mercedes sat in the driveway like a throne, still gleaming despite the weather. I'd driven from my apartment in Lakewood, a modest one-bedroom place overlooking the lake. Simple, quiet, everything I needed. Through the front window, I could see movement. My grandson, Noah, 8 years old, pressed his face against the glass, waving. His sister, Lily, 10, appeared beside him. I waved back, noticing immediately that Noah's jacket looked thin for November, and Lily's shoes seemed worn at the toes. Brandon opened the door before I reached it. He stood there in his tailored suit, home from the office, but still dressed like he was closing deals. "William, you're early. Traffic must have been light." It was fine. I stepped inside, shaking rain from my coat. "Let me take that." He reached for my jacket, but his eyes were already scanning my clothing. Jeans, a flannel shirt, work boots I'd owned for 15 years. "Sarah's still finishing dinner. Why don't you wait in the living room?" The house smelled like roasted chicken and something sharp I couldn't identify. Expensive candles, probably. Everything in this house cost more than it needed to. The furniture was that deliberately modern style, uncomfortable but impressive looking. Abstract art on the walls that I suspected Sarah would never have chosen herself. Sarah appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. My daughter, 34 years old, but looking older somehow, tired around the eyes. "Dad, you made it." She hugged me quickly, then stepped back as Brandon positioned himself beside her. A united front. "Wouldn't miss it, sweetheart." We sat down to dinner. Brandon took the head of the table despite my presence. The children sat across from me, quiet and watchful in that way children get when they're used to walking on eggshells. Brandon poured himself wine without offering me any. "So, William, how's retirement treating you?" "Must be strange after all those years at the mill." I had owned and operated Preston Timber Processing for 42 years. Built it from nothing in 1981. Sold it 18 months ago for $31 million. But Brandon preferred his version of my history. "It suits me. I couldn't do it. A man needs purpose." He cut his steak with precision. "Speaking of purpose, did you see the Mercedes outside? GLE 450, just picked it up last week. Of course, with my position at Whitmore Investments, the firm expects a certain image." Sarah smiled weakly into her wine glass. "That's quite an investment," I said carefully. "Investment?" "Exactly right. You understand business, William. Sometimes you need to spend money to make money. Not everyone gets that." He glanced at my flannel shirt. Lily tried to ask me about my week. Brandon talked over her. "The GLE has a twin-turbo inline 6, 0 to 100 in 5.9 seconds. Though I don't suppose you'd appreciate that coming from a Subaru. It gets me where I need to go. Practical. That's the word. Practical." He said it like it was a diagnosis. The meal continued in this pattern. Every topic became a referendum on worth and status. When Noah finally managed to ask about fishing, Brandon interrupted. "William doesn't have time for hobbies anymore. Retirement's expensive, right, William? Fixed income, have to watch every dollar." I watched Sarah refill his glass before it emptied. An automatic gesture. She'd learned his rhythms. This wasn't the daughter I'd raised. The confident environmental science major who'd wanted to save wetlands and restore ecosystems. This was someone smaller, dimmer, constantly monitoring the temperature of the room. After dinner, Brandon suggested cigars on the patio. Just us men. Sarah started clearing plates with the precision of someone who'd been corrected too many times. The children disappeared upstairs without being told. On the patio, Brandon lit an expensive cigar, offered me one. I declined, never acquired the taste. Of course, he exhaled smoke toward the rain. "Listen, William, I've been meaning to talk to you about something. Sarah's birthday is coming up. I'm planning something special, but you know how these things are. Expensive. I was thinking, since you sold the business, maybe you could contribute. Split it 50-50? What did you have in mind?" "Weekend at a spa resort. About 8,000 total. So 4,000 from you." "That's generous of you to offer." "Offer?" He laughed. "William, I'm doing you a favor here. Giving you a chance to show Sarah you still care, that you can still provide something. I know retirement's been tough. Fixed income, watching pennies. This would mean a lot to her. I'll think about it." "Think about it?" His voice sharpened. It's $4,000, William, for your daughter. Unless that's too much? I understand if the mill didn't leave you with much to work with. I looked at this man who'd married my daughter 6 years ago. The man who'd gradually convinced her she needed him more than she needed herself. Who'd turned family dinners into performances of his superiority. I'll let you know. He stubbed out the cigar with more force than necessary. You do that. Driving home that night, I made a decision. The next morning, I called Marcus Whitmore. Marcus, it's Bill Preston. Bill, good to hear from you. How's that portfolio performing? Beautifully, as always. Listen, I need to move some money around, and I want to do it properly. Would you have time this week to discuss a transfer? Of course. Actually, why don't you come by the office? We can review everything in person. I have a junior associate I'd like you to meet. Brandon Miller, sharp young man, handles several of our mid-tier clients. Is Thursday afternoon good for you? Thursday's perfect. Let's say 2 o'clock. After hanging up, I sat back in my chair. Brandon Miller worked at Whitmore Investments, the same firm that managed my $15 million portfolio, the same firm where I was one of Marcus Whitmore's top 5 clients. Brandon had no idea. For 18 months, I'd kept my wealth completely private. Simple apartment, old car, practical clothes. I'd wanted to see who people really were when they thought I had nothing. Brandon had shown me exactly who he was. Now it was time to show him who I was. Thursday arrived with cold November sunshine. I dressed carefully. Same flannel shirt, same jeans, same work boots. I wanted to look exactly as Brandon expected. Whitmore Investments occupied floors 15 through 17 of a glass tower downtown. I'd been there dozens of times over the past year, always after hours or on weekends when junior staff weren't around. Marcus preferred it that way for his top clients. Privacy, discretion, personal service. The lobby was marble and chrome, designed to intimidate. I walked to the reception desk. The young woman behind it looked up with professional politeness that flickered toward doubt when she saw my clothes. Can I help you? I have an appointment with Marcus Whitmore at 2 o'clock. William Preston. Her fingers flew over the keyboard. The doubt vanished, replaced by something close to alarm. Of course, Mr. Preston. Let me call up immediately. Mr. Whitmore will be right down. She picked up the phone, spoke quietly, hung up. Please have a seat. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? I'm fine, thank you. I sat in one of the leather chairs, watching the elevators. This was going to be interesting. The elevator dinged. Brandon stepped out, laughing with 2 colleagues, all of them in expensive suits, carrying themselves with the easy confidence of men who believed they owned their world. He was mid-sentence when he saw me. The laughter died. His face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, recognition, disbelief, and finally, something ugly. He said something to his colleagues, then walked toward me. William, what are you doing here? I have an appointment. His colleagues had followed, curious now. An appointment? Brandon's voice carried across the lobby. At Whitmore Investments? That's correct. He looked at the receptionist. Is this some kind of joke? The receptionist's face was carefully blank. Mr. Preston has an appointment with Mr. Whitmore at 2 o'clock. Brandon turned back to me, and I saw it then. The calculation. The assessment. He decided I was confused, embarrassing, possibly senile. William, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I think there's been a misunderstanding. This is an investment firm. We manage portfolios for high net worth individuals. Maybe you're looking for the bank? They have a branch down the street that handles, regular accounts. I said nothing. He was building to something, and I wanted to let him get there. Security. He gestured to the guard near the door. Can you help Mr. Preston find his way out? I think he's a bit lost. The guard looked uncertain. The receptionist had gone pale. Mr. Miller, she started. It's fine, Brandon said, smiling now, enjoying himself. He turned to his colleagues. My father-in-law, good man, worked at a mill his whole life, but retirement's been tough on him. Gets confused sometimes. The colleagues laughed, a little uncomfortable but following Brandon's lead. One of them, a young woman in a designer suit, looked at me with pity. That's when the private elevator opened. Marcus Whitmore stepped out. 62 years old, silver hair, a suit that cost more than Brandon's car payment. He saw me immediately, smiled, walked over with his hand extended. Bill, wonderful to see you. Right on time, as always. The lobby went silent. Brandon's smile froze on his face. Marcus, I said, shaking his hand. Thank you for making time. Always a pleasure. Marcus turned to Brandon, and his expression cooled. Mr. Miller, is there a problem? No, sir, Brandon stammered. I didn't realize. Didn't realize what? That William Preston is one of our most valued clients? That his portfolio exceeds $15 million? Or that he's been with this firm for over a year? 15 million. Brandon's voice came out as a whisper. Yes. Marcus looked at Brandon the way you'd look at something stuck to your shoe. Did you just try to have building security remove one of my top clients? I thought he was. Lost? Confused? Those were your words, I believe. Marcus's voice could have cut glass. In front of multiple witnesses, you attempted to humiliate a man who generates more in quarterly management fees than your annual salary. The colleagues had backed away. The receptionist was staring at her keyboard. The security guard had disappeared entirely. I should mention, Marcus continued, that Mr. Preston called me yesterday. Wanted to discuss transferring his portfolio. Said he was, and I quote, concerned about the culture at the firm. Now I understand why. Brandon's face had gone from red to white. Mr. Whitmore, please, I didn't know. You didn't know because you made assumptions. You saw a man in work boots and decided he couldn't possibly be worth your respect. That's not just poor judgment, Mr. Miller, that's a fundamental failure of character. I can explain. No need. Mr. Preston, shall we go to my office? I'd like to assure you personally that this behavior doesn't reflect our firm's values. Actually, Marcus, before we do that, there's something I think Brandon should know. Of course. Brandon married my daughter 6 years ago. I watched Brandon's face, watched him process the implications. Last week, at dinner, he asked me to contribute $4,000 to a spa weekend for Sarah. Said retirement was tough on me, that I was on a fixed income, watching pennies. Suggested I might not be able to afford it. Oh God, Brandon's voice was barely audible. I've spent 18 months watching him treat Sarah like a subordinate. Watched him talk over my grandchildren. Watched him measure everyone's worth by their appearance and their bank account. I wanted to see who he really was when he thought I had nothing. He showed me. The lobby was completely silent now. More people had gathered, drawn by the commotion. Junior associates, senior partners, administrative staff, all watching. Brandon, I said quietly, you had every opportunity to be kind. Every opportunity to treat people with basic respect and dignity. You chose condescension instead. You chose cruelty. Mr. Whitmore, Brandon turned desperately to Marcus. I've been with the firm for 4 years. I've brought in good clients. It's a misunderstanding. Is it? Marcus pulled out his phone, tapped the screen. I've been reviewing your client files since Mr. Preston's call yesterday. Want to know what I found? Brandon said nothing. 17 formal complaints in the past 2 years. All suppressed by your team leader who happens to be your golf buddy. Clients describing you as arrogant, dismissive, more interested in fees than service. We lost 3 significant accounts because of your behavior, but your team leader kept covering for you because you were good at bringing in new business. That ends today. I'm not a cruel man, but I believe in consequences. And I believe that people who abuse their position, who treat others as lesser, need to face those consequences publicly. The same way they deliver their cruelty. Clear out your desk, Brandon. You're terminated effective immediately. Your final paycheck will include 2 weeks severance as required by law, nothing more. All client handoffs will be managed by other associates. You're not to contact any clients directly. But sir, the mortgage, the car payments I have. Expenses. Yes, I know. You made those choices believing you were untouchable. You were wrong. Brandon looked at me one last time. There was hatred there, but also something else. The dawning realization that he'd destroyed himself. William, please, you don't understand. There are things, financial problems, I need this job. Then you should have done it better. Marcus gestured to security. 2 guards appeared. Please escort Mr. Miller to his desk, supervise while he collects personal items, then see him out of the building. As they led Brandon away, Marcus turned to the assembled staff. Let this be clear to everyone. At Whitmore Investments, we judge people by their character and their competence, not by their appearance or their bank balance. Anyone who cannot meet that standard has no place here. The crowd dispersed quickly. Marcus and I rode the elevator to his 17th floor office. Bill, I have to say, that was remarkably restrained of you. Was it? I'm not sure I feel particularly restrained. You could have told him who you were at any point. Instead, you let him expose himself completely. There's a certain elegance to that. I've been thinking about Sarah, about what she's been living with. If I'd told Brandon privately, he'd have changed his behavior toward me, but not toward her. The humiliation needed to be public, because the cruelty was private and constant. Understood. For what it's worth, I've been managing wealth for 35 years. I've learned that money doesn't change people. It just amplifies who they already were. Your son-in-law was probably a narcissist long before he had any success. The job just gave him a platform. We spent an hour reviewing my portfolio. Everything was performing well. I decided to keep the account at Whitmore Investments. Marcus ran a good firm, and one bad associate didn't change that. Before I left, Marcus asked, "What happens now? With Sarah? With your grandchildren?" Now, I tell my daughter the truth. All of it. That evening, I drove to Sarah's house. Brandon's Mercedes was gone from the driveway. Sarah answered the door. Her eyes were red. She'd been crying. "Dad, can I come in?" She nodded, stepped aside. The children were at the table doing homework. They looked up when I entered, uncertain. "Go play in your rooms for a bit," Sarah told them. "Grandpa and I need to talk." They left without argument. We sat in the living room. Sarah had a glass of wine, half empty. "He called me," she said, "told me what happened." His version, I imagine. "Yes. He said you set him up, that you deliberately humiliated him, that you cost him his job. That's partially true. I did deliberately create the situation. but he cost himself the job. I just provided the stage. Dad, why didn't you tell me? About the money? About selling the company for $31 million? Living in that tiny apartment, driving that old car, dressing like you can barely afford new clothes? I needed to know. Know what? Who Brandon really was. Sarah, when your mother died 4 years ago, I had a lot of time to think. About wealth, about worth, about what matters. I sold the company because I was tired, and because $31 million is more than I'll ever need. But I kept it quiet because I wanted to see how people treated me when they thought I had nothing. And Brandon? Brandon showed me exactly who he is. A man who measures worth by bank accounts and car brands. Who treats service workers like furniture. Who talks over his own children because they're not important enough to interrupt his monologues. Who's been systematically making you feel smaller, less capable, more dependent. She was crying now, quiet tears. I knew, she whispered. I knew what he was doing, but I kept telling myself it was stress from work, that he was a good provider, that I should be grateful. Grateful? Sweetheart, you have a master's degree in environmental science. You published research on watershed restoration. You were brilliant. What happened? He convinced me it wasn't practical, that we needed my salary from his firm's administrative department more than we needed my dreams. That being a good mother meant being available, which meant a desk job with no ambition. And I believed him. God, Dad, I believed him. I reached across, took her hand. There's more you need to know. I showed her my phone, the file I'd compiled, financial records, photographs, transaction histories. What is this? Brandon has a gambling problem. Sports betting, online poker, casino trips he told you were client meetings. In the past 18 months, he's lost over $200,000. What? The Mercedes? Leased at 28% interest because his credit is destroyed. This house? Second mortgage taken out last year without your knowledge because his name is the only one on the deed. He made sure of that when you bought it, remember? Said it was for tax purposes. Oh my God. The designer suits, the expensive dinners, the cigars, all of it is leveraged debt. He's been using his position at Whitmore to cultivate wealthy clients, then borrowing money from them with promises of insider investment opportunities. That's securities fraud, Sarah. Marcus Whitmore found evidence of it in the client files. He's not just fired. He's likely facing criminal charges. Sarah sat back, processing. The wine glass trembled in her hand. How long have you known? You suspected gambling after 6 months. Confirmed it a year ago. The fraud I discovered 3 months ago with Marcus's help. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? She was quiet for a long time. No, she finally said. I'd have defended him, told you that you were wrong, that you didn't understand, that you were just prejudiced against him because he was successful. Exactly. You needed to see it yourself. And today I gave him enough rope to hang himself. In front of witnesses, in front of his boss, in a way that left no room for excuses or explanations. That was cruel, Dad. It was. And I'm not entirely proud of it. But Sarah, he's been cruel to you every day for years. Making you question yourself, diminishing your accomplishments, isolating you from friends. That's cruelty too, just quieter. She nodded slowly. What do I do now? Now you protect yourself and the children. File for divorce immediately. I have a lawyer ready. Her name is Patricia Chen, one of the best family law attorneys in the state. She knows the whole situation. Get a restraining order. Brandon's financial desperation makes him unpredictable. Document everything. The gambling, the debt, the fraud. It'll matter in custody proceedings. And move forward. Rebuild your life. Pursue your career. Show Noah and Lily what strength looks like. Can I afford all that? The divorce, the lawyer, supporting the kids on my own? Yes. I'm going to help you. Not because you need rescuing, but because that's what family does. There's a trust fund for the children's education, already established. And I'm buying this house from the bank, putting it in your name only. Dad, I can't. Yes, you can. This isn't charity, Sarah. This is your inheritance, just arriving a little early. Your mother and I always planned to leave everything to you. I'm just accelerating the timeline. We talked until midnight. Sarah called Patricia Chen, scheduled a meeting for the next morning. I stayed in the guest room. The children had been listening from upstairs, we discovered. They came down around 10:30, couldn't sleep. Is Dad coming back? Lily asked. Not tonight, sweetheart, Sarah said. Grandpa's gonna stay here instead. I pulled them both onto the couch. We watched a movie, something silly with talking animals. Noah fell asleep against my shoulder. Lily stayed awake, thoughtful. Grandpa, she said during the credits. Yes, honey. Are you actually rich? I smiled. I have enough money, yes. Why did you pretend you didn't? Because sometimes you need to see who people really are. And you can't do that if they're trying to impress you. Did Dad fail the test? She was 10 years old, but she understood. Your dad made choices, Lily. Those choices have consequences. That's not a test, that's just life. The divorce proceedings moved quickly. Patricia Chen was as good as advertised. She filed for emergency custody based on Brandon's financial crimes and gambling addiction. The court granted it. Brandon was allowed supervised visits, twice a month, at a family center. He showed up for the first two, then stopped coming. The house sale cleared. I bought it from the bank for the outstanding mortgage amount, transferred the deed to Sarah. Free and clear, no payments, her name only. She cried when the papers came through. The criminal investigation into Brandon's securities fraud took 4 months. He was indicted on 7 counts. Faced with overwhelming evidence, he took a plea deal. 3 years probation, restitution to the defrauded clients, permanent barring from the securities industry. He avoided prison, but his career was over. Sarah got a job at an environmental consulting firm. Started building the career she'd set aside. Watershed restoration projects, ecosystem analysis, the work she'd always wanted to do. She was good at it. Better than good. 6 months after the divorce, I stood in my apartment in Lakewood, looking at bank statements. $28 million, give or take. More than I'd ever need. I called my financial advisor, started setting up education trusts for Noah and Lily, full ride scholarships to any university they chose, graduate school if they wanted it, protected from Brandon, from creditors, from anyone who might try to claim it. I kept my apartment in Lakewood, kept my Subaru, kept my flannel shirts and work boots, not because I was hiding anymore, but because I liked them. They were comfortable, practical, real. The money had never been the point. The point was character, integrity, how you treat people when you think they can't do anything for you. Brandon had failed that test spectacularly, and in doing so, he'd freed Sarah from a marriage that was slowly crushing her. Sometimes justice looks like revenge. Sometimes it is revenge. The line between them depends on intention. My intention had been protection. The method had been exposure. I could live with that. 3 months later, I stood in Sarah's house helping Noah with homework at the kitchen table. Lily sat nearby working on a science project. The house felt different now, lighter. Sarah had rearranged furniture, painted walls, made it hers. The children wore new winter coats, proper boots. Not because I'd bought them, because Sarah had with her own money. Pride in every purchase. "Grandpa," Noah said, "can you explain this math problem? Let's look at it together." We worked through it, not doing it for him, guiding him to the answer himself. Sarah came home at 5:30, smiled seeing us at the table. "How was work?" I asked. "Good, really good. I'm working on a watershed restoration project, using my degree finally." "That's wonderful." After dinner, after the children went to play, Sarah and I sat with tea. "I've been thinking," she said, "about everything that happened. Part of me wishes you'd told me sooner. About the money, about what you knew. I understand that. But another part understands why you didn't. I wouldn't have believed you. I'd have defended him, told you it was fine. Maybe. Dad, did you ever worry you went too far? Setting up that whole thing at his office?" I considered the question carefully. Yes. Sometimes I wonder if I could have handled it differently. But Brandon needed to face consequences publicly. Private confrontation wouldn't have ended his behavior. It was humiliating for him. It was, and that troubles me. But Sarah, he was humiliating you privately every day, making you feel small, making you question your worth. Sometimes breaking one person's pride is necessary to restore another person's dignity. She nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about Mom. What she would have said about all this. Your mother would have been proud of you for leaving, for rebuilding. She never tolerated disrespect. She would have hit him with a frying pan probably." We both laughed. First real laugh I'd heard from her in years. "The children seem happier," I observed. "They are. It's strange. They miss Brandon, but they're lighter, less tense. They don't walk on eggshells anymore. That's good. Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always." "The $15 million at Whitmore Investments, is that real, or was it just for show?" "It's real. Properly invested, diversified portfolio, quarterly reviews." "Why keep it there? Why not move it after everything?" "Because Marcus Whitmore runs a good firm. And because Brandon no longer works there to feel uncomfortable. Why let his mistakes dictate my financial decisions?" She smiled. "That's very practical of you. I'm a practical man, always have been." Later, driving home to Lakewood, I thought about the past 4 months. The investigation, the confrontation, the divorce, the rebuilding. Had I gone too far? Maybe. Could I have handled it with more grace? Probably. But Sarah was free. The children were cared for. Brandon was facing the consequences of his choices. Sometimes justice looks like revenge. Sometimes it is revenge. The line between them depends on intention. My intention had been protection. The method had been exposure. I could live with that. At my apartment, I opened my laptop, checked my account balance. 28 million plus change, growing with investments. More money than I'd ever need. I opened a fresh document, typed Education Trust Fund, Noah and Lily Preston. Started researching trust structures, tax implications, educational expense categories. The money wasn't the point, but it was a tool, a good one, and I was going to use it wisely. Before bed, my phone buzzed. Text from Sarah. "Thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for not giving up. I love you, Dad." I typed back, "I love you too, sweetheart, always." Set the phone down, smiled in the darkness. Justice served. Family restored. Future secured. Task complete. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because stories like these remind us that character matters more than appearance, that dignity is worth fighting for, and that sometimes the quietest people carry the most power. Until next time, take care of yourselves, protect what matters, and never judge a book by its cover. You never know who's wearing work boots and flannel while managing millions.